She was a brilliant aerospace engineer who'd built her career, dodging assumptions and proving doubters wrong. But that snowbound evening at Chicago O'Hare, Vernice Carter was just another delayed passenger watching the world through frosted glass. She didn't know the man struggling with his wheelchair was Curtis Glenn, heir to a tech empire worth billions. She didn't know his stepmother had orchestrated a web of lies that destroyed families. And she certainly didn't know the silver necklace around her throat held the key to bringing down one of America's most powerful women. Have you ever helped a stranger, only to discover that single act of kindness would unravel everything you thought you knew about your own life? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. The terminal hummed with frustrated energy, delayed flights, stranded passengers, the kind of chaos that strips away pretense. Vernice adjusted her laptop bag and scanned the gate area, her trained eye automatically cataloging details. 26 years of being underestimated had taught her to read rooms fast. That's when she noticed him. The man in the wheelchair sat isolated near the window, his expensive coat unable to hide the tension in his shoulders. Everyone else walked past like he was furniture, but Vernice saw the way his left wheel caught against the floor, saw the quiet frustration he tried to mask. She approached without hesitation. "Need a hand?" Curtis Glenn looked up, clearly startled that someone had spoken to him directly. His eyes, sharp blue, guarded, studied her face. "The wheel keeps sticking," he said simply. Vernice knelt, her engineering mind immediately assessing the problem. "Looks like debris in the axle mechanism. Push forward while I realign it." Working together, they freed the wheel. Curtis extended his hand. Curtis Glenn, Vernice Carter. She shook it, noting how his gaze lingered on the delicate silver chain at her throat, just a beat too long before he looked away. "You look like someone who could use a break too," he said, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. Something in his voice, equal parts exhaustion and genuine interest, made her sit. Outside, snow continued to fall in heavy sheets, trapping them all in this liminal space between destinations. "That's an unusual piece," Curtis said, nodding toward her necklace. "Looks antique." Vernice's fingers automatically moved to the pendant. It was a gift from someone important. He died 6 months ago. The words came out steadier than she felt. Curtis went very still. When he spoke again, his voice carried a strange weight. "I'm sorry for your loss. What was his name?" "Ali." She paused, studying his reaction. "Ali Benson." The color drained from Curtis's face. He stared at her necklace with an expression she couldn't quite read, recognition mixed with something that looked like grief. "That necklace," he said quietly. "It belonged to my brother." The revelation hung between them like a physical presence. Vernice felt the world tilt slightly off its axis. "Your brother?" she whispered. Curtis nodded slowly. "Ali Benson was my half-brother. Different mothers, same father. He kept our lives compartmentalized. During the flight to San Francisco, the truth spilled out in fragments. Curtis told her about their family's tech empire, about the stepmother who'd seized control after their father's death, about the growing distance between the brothers in Ali's final years. "He changed the last few months," Curtis said, staring out at the clouds below. "Paranoid, said he'd found something big, something about Evelyn, our stepmother. Said she was hiding contracts, payments, people." Vernice's throat tightened. "He told me he was working on something dangerous. Said it was safer if I didn't know details. Then he died of a supposed heart attack. 28 years old, healthiest person I knew. They cremated him before I could even ask questions." The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. "You think she killed him?" "I think," Curtis said carefully, "that my brother discovered something worth killing for." At the hotel, Vernice called her younger brother Ewell, a law student who'd been fighting for years to reopen their father's case. Their dad, once a government contractor, had been convicted of treason after exposing surveillance overreach. He died in prison 3 years ago, still maintaining his innocence. When Ewell examined the necklace under a magnifying glass, his hands began to shake. There's something inside this pendant, Vernis, something digital. The hidden drive contained a single video file. Ali speaking directly to the camera, his face haggard with exhaustion and fear. If you're watching this, then Evelyn succeeded. She's been running illegal surveillance operations through defense contracts for years. She framed Thomas Carter, Vernis's father, when he tried to expose her. The evidence is all here. Names, dates, financial records. She's turned patriotism into profit, and she's killed to protect it. The recording ended abruptly. In the silence that followed, Vernis felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Not just grief, but fury. They needed more than Ali's posthumous testimony. Curtis reached out to Golda Reese, his father's former advisor, who'd left the company when Evelyn took control. They found her living off the grid in a converted warehouse in Oakland, surrounded by boxes of documents and the ghosts of better times. "I warned Ali," Golda said, her weathered hands shaking as she poured coffee. "Told him Evelyn doesn't leave loose ends, but he was determined to clear your father's name," Vernis said. It was the right thing to do. She led them to a hidden safe, revealing files that made their evidence concrete. Falsified security memos, authorization letters signed by Evelyn, transaction logs showing payments to silence whistleblowers. "It's all here," Ewell breathed, scanning the documents. The whole surveillance program. They called it Project Mirror, civilian monitoring disguised as national security. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. Through the warehouse windows, they spotted black SUVs surrounding the building. "Back exit," Golda hissed. Now, they escaped through an alley system. Golda knew by heart, but the message was clear. Evelyn was watching. She knew they were getting close. As they huddled in a storage unit across town, planning their next move, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows. Betty Lou, Curtis's ex-fiancée, bleeding from a shoulder wound. "I stole these from Evelyn's office before her security caught me," she gasped, handing over a folder. "She's moving everything offshore in 48 hours. Once Project Mirror leaves U.S. jurisdiction, your evidence becomes worthless." Curtis stared at the woman he'd once planned to marry. "Why help us?" Betty Lou's smile was bitter. "Because I stayed silent once when I should have spoken up. It cost me everything I cared about." The Mortec data facility loomed against the California sky, like a concrete monument to secrets. Getting inside required all their skills and more luck than any of them deserved. Betty Lou's residual security clearance got them through the outer perimeter. Ewell's technical skills disabled key surveillance systems. Curtis's knowledge of the building's wheelchair-accessible routes gave them their path to the server room. But Evelyn had anticipated them. In the basement corridor, they found Harmon waiting, Evelyn's fixer, the man who'd orchestrated Curtis's accident 2 years earlier. "I really hoped it wouldn't come to this," Harmon said almost sadly. "But family loyalty only goes so far." The fight was brief but vicious. Curtis used his wheelchair as a weapon, ramming Harmon into the wall, while Vernis grabbed the security codes they needed. By the time building security arrived, they'd downloaded terabytes of Project Mirror files and escaped through the loading dock. But victories came with costs. Betty Lou had been shot during their escape, and they all knew Evelyn would escalate her response. The final confrontation came at Evelyn's estate, a glass and steel monument to power in Marin County. She received them in her study like a queen granting audience to rebellious subjects. "You've caused quite a disturbance," Evelyn said, her voice carrying the chill of absolute authority. "But your children playing with forces you don't understand." Vernis placed the encrypted drives on the mahogany desk between them. "We understand enough. We have everything, the contracts, the surveillance data, evidence of murder and conspiracy. Evelyn examined the drives with clinical detachment. And what exactly do you want? Money? A position in the company? Your father's name cleared? Justice, Vernis said simply. For the first time, Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. Justice is a luxury for people with power, Miss Carter. I have spent decades building something meaningful, security systems that protect this country from real threats. Your father was naive, my stepson was weak, and you're all idealists who don't understand how the world actually works. Curtis leaned forward in his wheelchair. We understand that you killed Ali. We understand that you destroyed the Carter family to cover your crimes. And we understand that your empire is built on lies. Evelyn's laugh was cold as winter rain. Power doesn't die in headlines, Curtis. It adapts, it evolves, it survives. Maybe, Vernis said, pulling out her phone. But first, it has to face the truth. The broadcast studio lights were merciless, but Vernis Carter had never felt more ready to be seen. Across from her sat investigative journalist Maria Santos, whose expose series had already brought down 2 senators and a defense contractor. Tonight, she would help Vernis bring down something much bigger. We're live in 30 seconds, the producer called out. Vernis touched the silver necklace one last time, not for luck, but as a promise to the man who died trying to tell this story. Good evening. Tonight, we present evidence of a massive surveillance operation that has been targeting American citizens for over a decade. Our guest is aerospace engineer Vernis Carter, whose investigation has uncovered a web of corruption reaching the highest levels of government and private industry. Vernis looked directly into the camera. My name is Vernis Carter. 6 months ago, I thought I was helping a stranger in an airport. Tonight, I'm here to tell you how that act of kindness exposed a conspiracy that killed the man I loved and destroyed my family. She told it all, every detail, every document, every lie that had been buried under the banner of national security. The evidence streamed across screens nationwide, contracts, recordings, financial records that painted a picture of systematic abuse of power. Evelyn Moore turned surveillance into profit. Vernis continued, her voice steady and clear. She silenced whistleblowers, eliminated threats, and wrapped it all in patriotism. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when the people who carry it don't. Within hours, the story dominated every news cycle. Protesters gathered outside MoreTech headquarters. Congressional leaders called for immediate hearings. Federal prosecutors announced a grand jury investigation. 3 days later, Thomas Carter's conviction was officially vacated. Vernis stood in the courthouse lobby, finally holding the document that cleared her father's name, too late for him to see it, but not too late for justice. Curtis found her on the courthouse steps, where she sat holding the legal papers and crying for the first time since Ali's death. He would be proud, Curtis said simply. I hope so, she whispered. I hope they both would be. A month later, they launched the Carter Benson Foundation for Digital Rights, a non-profit dedicated to government transparency and surveillance reform. Betty Lou, recovered from her injuries, became their first legal director. Ewell graduated law school early to join their team full-time. Evelyn Moore was indicted on 17 federal charges. Her empire crumbled as allies abandoned her and investigators dug deeper into decades of corruption. She maintained her innocence, even as she was led away in handcuffs, but her cold composure had finally cracked. The last scene wasn't in a courtroom or a boardroom, but on a San Francisco rooftop where 5 friends gathered to watch the sunset. They'd each paid a price for speaking truth to power, but they'd also discovered something more valuable than safety, the knowledge that silence, once broken, could never be restored. Vernis raised her glass, not in celebration, but in remembrance, to the ones who spoke when it was hardest, to the ones who listened when it mattered most. Curtis added. And to the ones still finding their voice, Yule finished. The city sparkled below them, full of lights and lives and stories still waiting to be told. Somewhere in that maze of possibility, other people were making the choice between safety and truth, between silence and justice. The necklace still hung around Vernis's throat, not as a memorial anymore, but as a reminder. Some gifts are heavier than others, some secrets are meant to be shared. And sometimes, helping a stranger in an airport terminal is just the beginning of changing the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If Vernis's story moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently about the power of speaking up, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell because your support keeps these stories alive. So hit that like, share, and subscribe to join us again. Until next time, stay bold, stay true, and let your threads of heritage shine bright.